Hello, everyone. I'm going to try to get in a quick Q&A while I got a little time away. My son actually is having a medical procedure tomorrow, and so I'll be in the hospital all day. So Bro.Diallo show will be a rerun for the Bro.Diallo show on Q4 Radio. They're going to do a rebroadcast of a previously taped show, but I want to try to get something out because I wasn't able to do Monday, and it's not likely I'll be there Friday either. So I want to be able to engage with the people then before I go into this and get this procedure done. So anyway, I'm available for Q&A here on my YouTube. You can also find me on Facebook, and I'm ready when y'all are. So if you have any questions or issues you want to engage with, now is the time. I'm sorry, I am a little, as usual, I'm always sleep deprived. I might have to work on that. But, to the best of my ability, if I don't know the answers to any questions you have, then I will definitely, maybe we can work it out here together and try to figure it out here this evening together. So, hey, Jada, what's up? Everybody in Facebook. Oh, thank you, Tito, sending positive energy for Aromo's procedure. Angela wants to know, why do I think all these black men? Angela on Facebook, you want to know, why do I think all these black men? Yeah, his procedure I think it'll go well. He's in good. Oh, why do I think all these black men are killing and raping these kids? I wow. As far as the rampant abuse and targeting of black kids, as I said, from a systemic analysis. Okay, let me turn this down. Angela wants to know why all these black men are killing and raping black kids. Which, first of all, let me say that's a pretty loaded question. But to the extent I'll go beyond all the issues with the question being loaded and simply speak to the issue of child sex abuse and child predation. When you live in a society where everything is commodified, and essentially a capitalist or strictly hierarchical society, those who are not part of the infrastructure, the economic infrastructure, are looked at as burdens or property or commodity. And in a capitalist system based on exploitation and extraction, people become targets. People begin to prey on each other. You'll find that in colonial societies, if you go read histories of colonialisms written by the colonizers, you'll find societies that had relatively low rates of child abuse, predation, rape, homicide, robberies. Once they come under capitalist authority and capitalist hierarchy and capitalist means of productions and capitalist value systems, they begin to devalue people. So I assert that men raping children, men raping other men in prison, and the very ongoing epidemic levels of people preying on other people is rooted, as Karl Marx would say, in the economic and valuation system. You can't have a valuation system that pretty much measures that tells you that people have no inherent value beyond what they can produce, and then expect people not to begin to dehumanize and devalue and objectify and prey upon and exploit people. And in the system of exploitation, people higher on the social hierarchy always prey on people lower in the social hierarchy. So elderly, children, women, ethnic, racial, religious minorities all get preyed upon by people higher than them. So there's universal predation. So I'm not sure why Black women would expect Black men to be fully integrated and achieve and elevated within a predatory economy and not begin to exhibit predatory behaviors. So the only way to stop this epidemic of rape and exploitation and predation is to exclude predation from the economy and exclude predation from all social relationships. You can't have a predatory economy, and you can't have a lot of feminists celebrate these men, in the predatory economy as they elevate in the economy, and then brothers who don't have nothing, oh, you broke, you still on your mama's couch, you a hotel. And so, you're either going to have predators, only predators, or you're going to have humane treatment. And it's really hard for human beings to engage in a predatory economy and not have predatory social relations. So all predatory social relations, where even men raping all these kids, black men raping all these children, even that can be rooted in the economy. And really, it's throughout the stratification. Wealthy men rape children, poor men rape children. It's just that wealthy men are able to fly to Bangladesh and get a 5-star hotel and engage in child predation, where black men tend to go and prey on their family members and other weak members. So, you have to target all predation, or you can't just isolate certain forms of predation. And I think that's why, because those same men who prey on children were preyed upon, and live in a predatory system, and so they get with the program. Okay, let's. Mike Tyson has. Chris asks, Mike Tyson has a Che Guevara tattooed on his ribs and Chairman Mao on his right arm. If you were to get a tattoo of a socialist icon, who would it be? Wow, I don't have any tattoos, but if I was to get a tattoo of an icon, it would probably be Dale Jones. I'd get Dale Jones on my rib, and I probably would get Carlos Cooks. Those are two of my favorite, and not just because they were great revolutionaries, but also because I just like their disposition, their attitudes. But maybe I'd say Dale Jones and Carlos Cooks. Or change that. I'd trade out Carlos Cooks with William Mackey, because I know them both personally. I had an opportunity to study directly and interact with them person to person. So yeah, Mackey, Professor William Mackey, and brother Dale Jones, the war correspondent. Tito, what's the difference between personal property and private property within an economic system? Well, in a capitalist economic system, there is no difference. Your personal property is your private property, and property is the highest virtue. So that means if I have the capacity to own 1,000 acres of land, and then within certain parameters, depending on what society you live in, you could do whatever you want with that land. Whereas in a socialist system, private property doesn't exist. It's outlawed. Personal property are those things that belong to you that you use in your immediate life. So under a socialist system, you can own your car, you can own your tools that you use to work with, you can own your devices, your instruments, but you can't own land. Personal property is houses that I live in, that I inhabit. This home is my personal property. But my private property is if I own a whole block of housing. I could own 1,500 units of housing, and that's my private property. Or if I come up with a medical procedure and I patent it, and there's a wonderful medical procedure, and I go to the government and get a patent on it, and anyone who wants to use that technique or procedure has to pay me a certain amount of money, even if they're on the other side of the world. That's my private property. Under a socialist system, even if you created something for the benefit of humanity, then it becomes the property of humanity, and everyone gets to use it, and people aren't denied access to life-saving procedures based on their ability to pay me for my idea or my intellectual property. So your personal property are things that you use to enrich your life, to sustain your life, to build relationships and engage with other people. Private property is the property which you use to enrich yourself or to accumulate wealth and means beyond your basic needs and well-being. In a socialist sense. But in a capitalist, in this society, there's almost no distinction. Your private property is your personal property, your personal property is your private property. And so certain property is communally owned that you don't, so you would have to have a concept of communal or collective ownership in order for that to make sense. So you have in a socialist system, you have personal property and communal property. In a capitalist system, you have personal property is synonymous with private property. And all the laws are pretty much set up to protect property as opposed to enrich or protect humanity. And let me see if I can go to Facebook, that the last couple. And I'm sorry if I missed questions. I wish I had a better system for getting to people's questions. So if I skip your question, it's not on purpose, and I apologize. AI and machine learning will completely alter the job market soon. How will we respond to this? Well, it's funny if you read labor history, go all the way back to the Luddites. Since the founding of industrial labor, because there was a time where workers were a very small part of the labor system. The vast majority of humans who lived under Western economic systems, they were basically sustenance farmers or nomads or like traders or merchants. Very few people worked for wages. In fact, there was a time in early industrial society where in Great Britain, the home of the Industrial Revolution, both of them, where like less than 5% of the people worked for wages and worked for companies. So this whole wage laborer and working for income and working for an employer is a relatively new phenomenon for humanity. So what I imagine is going to happen when AI displaces, and humans have been worried about being replaced by machines for the longest. We work and toil, and we're miserable in that work and toil. And then when a new instrument or machine comes along to displace us, we hate being displaced. So what's going to happen? One of two scenarios. Under the capitalist system, as workers are displaced, people will return to sustenance existence. And those places already exist. If you want to look at something like that, you can go to like the slums of Accra, or you can go to rural India, or you can go to the city centers in places like Korea or Hong Kong and China, where you have literally millions of people who do not have an opportunity to sell their labor in exchange for wages. And what people tend to do is they create what they call a black market economy. They begin to sell illegal goods or unlicensed goods. So what you're going to have is basically the whole planet will become essentially a slum. You go to the favelas in Brazil, and so we already have situations where even though these people haven't been displaced by machines or artificial intelligence, they have been displaced by globalization. And so even though they're in the same situation that many of us will find ourselves in. And in that time, people will go to like they were in what was called the pre-industrial era, or even the dark ages of medieval Europe, which means people will be on small tracts of land or plots of land trying to eke out a living. People will begin to consume move around landfills and waste sites and try to eke out a living from landfills and all that. So if you really wanted to see what it's going to be like, there are already people who have been pretty much who aren't considered production units, people who are no longer considered employable, who have been like this for decades. And so we already know what that looks like. And it's starting to appear here already before AI takes over, because you look at the various tent cities. So that's under capitalism. If we are able to embark on a socialist transformation of society, then what happens is those machines and that artificial intelligence, instead of being utilized to generate profit, it will be utilized to generate goods and services and speak to the leisure and development of humanity. So instead of one person having $1 billion, many people, 1 billion people will have enough resources and comfort. And so the machines will either work for individuals, a small number of elite individuals, or the machines will work for humanity. And what's curious, if you know about DARPA and development of AI, you will know that the masses of the people, it was our collective input that made that. It wasn't Jeff Bezos. It wasn't, what's that dude's name? Elon Musk. Those people are parasites. They didn't invent, Bill Gates didn't invent the computer. Bill Gates didn't invent operating system. He didn't invent, and most of the innovations that came were by his employees. So Bill Gates is living off of the labor and inputs of the collective. So what we're either going to have to do is embark on the socialist revolution or get ready to join the people who live on subsistence, the people who live on less than 35 cents a day. So the whole world is just going to be slums. More people piled into cities, or people trying to scratch a living from some rural plot of land. That's what it's going to look like. We already have those conditions in the so-called third world, or the shithole countries, as Trump calls them. Okay. What do you feel are the biggest obstacles for Pan-Africanism in the 21st century? I'm going to have to quote Bobby E. Wright. Menticide, the fact that the masses of African people are ahistorical, anti-academic, and anti-analytical. So menticide is the biggest threat, not just to Pan-Africanism, but to the very ongoing existence of African people. Number two, the fact that a lot of African people have a regressive and stagnant view of what Africa is. You'll find a lot of so-called African centrics who have this primitive or regressive notion of Africa has been held in history. They want to go back to African antiquity. They want to go back to this fictional era. They want to go back to the Giza and become Imhotep. They want to go back to the Zulu warrior tribes. They want to go back to a bygone era that doesn't exist anymore and never existed and doesn't need to exist. So they have this idealized ancient concept of what it is to be African and what African is. So the fact that people cannot adapt, modernize, advance their view on who Africans are and what Africa is and what Africa needs to be is another thing. So a lot of reactionary and regressive attitudes towards who Africans are, what Africa is, and what African should become. Another obstacle to Pan-Africanism is that there are a lot more options and illusions, meaning that at the time, as Pan-Africanism was developing, going all the way back to Garvey, there were very few illusions about what our status in Africa and in the African diaspora. If you were in Africa outside of Ethiopia, you were under a colonial power. And you knew the name, the location, everywhere. You had no illusions, whether you were an educated African or an illiterate African, whether you were an Islamic African or what they call animist or traditional African. Every African had a base level understanding. We are colonized. And even in Ethiopia, that never became a formal colony, was under perpetual attack and threat from Italy, Germany, US. So no African on the African continent was under any illusion that we were anything more or less than a colonized people. Around the African diaspora, Latin America, Western Europe, of course, the United States, the Caribbean, every African knew we were under overt racism, apartheid segregation. And there were no illusions. So whether you chose to submit or to resist or do some combination of the two, there were no illusions. But in 2019, we got Barack Obamas and Beyonce's and Black people who seem like they have reached the stratosphere of Western affluence. So there are a lot of illusions where you put 10 Africans in a line and every African will give you a different definition of our status. Some Africans will say we're oppressed. Other Africans will say we free. Other Africans will say, well, oppression is just in your mind and you're a hater. Or some Africans say, if you free your mind, then everything's free. Some Africans say, I'm a patriotic, red-blooded American, descendant of slave, and my destiny is tied to the destiny of America. So before, if you wanted to start a Pan-African group, people are either like, I'm down or I'm not. And then you also have Africans running around, I'm Moor, I'm Indian, And so there are a lot more illusions. So the fact that we have a lot more options, we have a lot more escape holes, we have a lot more delusions about our status. So it's hard to organize people around to fight a condition that many of our people won't even acknowledge or don't even understand that they're in. So that's another obstacle. And, we have, through our integrationist struggles, and the integrationist struggles have fed off the black radical struggles. So what happens are the black radicals or the black revolutionaries will win concessions, will win resources. But when the white man is forced to give us concessions and resources, what he does is he turns around and hands out the power to the integrationists. So the radicals win the resources, the integrationists are rewarded and dole them out. And so a lot of black people just feel like, oh, we've been fighting and this is as far as we can go. So that's another thing. But there are a lot of obstacles. Hell, I could do the rest of the evening just talking about the various obstacles to Pan-Africanism. But one thing is for sure, if nothing else, even if you're an Uncle Tom bootlicking, handkerchief head Negro, one thing you have to understand, Pan-Africanism has never been more valid. And even if you don't have any respect for Africans, you look at Europe, you look at Asia, they talk about the Asian tiger economy, and they have an Asian trade unions and Asian mutual defense pact. You look at the European Union, you look at NATO, you look at all these other groups and nationalities. Even in Latin America, they were working on the Bolivarian revolution and Pan-Latin Americanism. So every group is either trying to posse up globally or preparing to be controlled and owned by the people who posseed up globally. So even though we're in a time where it's harder than ever to organize for Pan-Africanism, we've never been in a Pan-Africanism has never been more valid or validated than ever before. So it's bad and it's good at the same time. Ebony wants to know my thoughts on. Oh, sorry. Ebony wants to know your thoughts on the Black Panther Party and Eldridge Cleaver. Besides COINTELPRO, where did they go wrong? I take the position that Eldridge Cleaver was never sincere in his approach, which is unfortunate because Eldridge Cleaver was quite an intelligent man. But if you notice, Eldridge Cleaver, I think he was a part of the COINTELPRO. I know you don't want me to talk about COINTELPRO, but Eldridge Cleaver, after the party was essentially destroyed from without and within, he became a religious Mormon. He went and joined the white Mormons in Utah. He denounced black radicalism, and he was a mess. So I don't think he was ever truly down. I think he was either a shuckster and a shyster or an agent. And we could get more into that. There's certain speculation, but that's just my conclusion. Or maybe he was a madman. So I don't have much admiration for Eldridge Cleaver, but as Chris Marshall always says, we should still read him. We should still read his insights, even though there's speculation he didn't write Soul on Ice, and many of his publications were actually written by someone else. But again, speculation. But I think we can learn more about what not to do and how not to engage the struggle from Eldridge than to engage. But the Black Panthers went wrong in several ways. Number one, the Black Panthers, their vetting process was very weak. Essentially, if you know about the Panthers, they had a reading list and so on and so forth, but it was pretty much an open organization. Or I don't want to, and I'm not taking credit for this criticism. I'm actually Sundiata Akoli actually wrote in his book Bits and Pieces, 5 things the Panthers did right and 5 things the Panthers did wrong. So he said one thing is that the above ground and underground operations were fused. So if you were a member of the Black Panther Party during the day, you could be doing tutoring and breakfast service, and during the night you in the streets putting in work. And you look at other guerrilla operations like the Viet Cong or the Tamil Tiger or the FMLN, revolutionary organizations, when they did community outreach, education, charity work, they kept that separate and apart from the guerrilla. So if you were going to be an armed freedom fighter, you couldn't work within the legal or above ground apparatus. If you look at Hamas has politicians It has diplomats, it has bureaucrats, and then it has armed guerrillas on the underground. And those two people don't interact in mix. Well, the Panthers did that. Also, the Panthers were very poor in terms of not only vetting people as they went in, but leveling consequences against their enemies. You cannot survive as a formation if you're not in a position to reward your comrades and punish your enemies. They were very good at showing solidarity, rewarding, and building up their members, but they weren't very good at pursuing their enemies. And if you're going to be an armed revolutionary cadre, now if you're a non-violent, unarmed thing, then there's other things like shunning and other non-violent techniques that you can use to hold the people who don't hold to the agenda and the protocols to task. But if you are armed revolutionary faction, which they were, they publicly paraded. So once you put yourself out there, that's why you don't see me with my little pistol, my little revolver here on social media, because I'm not at that stage of my revolutionary development. I'm not an armed freedom fighter. I am an organizer. I'm engaged in an open conspiracy for Pan-Africanism, but I'm not I'm not part of an armed faction. And but anyway, once you make that pronouncement, once you come publicly for that position, you must be able to follow through on that. You've got to be ready to throw down the tomahawk. And there were a lot of people committing serious violations against the party. And again, if we go to other revolutionary guerrilla formations and revolutionary parties, you go to Winnie Mandela. If you join the ANC will fight with you to the death. But if you violated the unity, you snitched, you didn't hold to the discipline, you get the necklace. And they actually tried to incarcerate Winnie because she was taking out people. She was taking out the Afrikaners, but people within her circle that didn't hold and follow the revolutionary protocols. And you should also know, before you join the armed faction, if you're not ready to exercise that discipline, then don't go to the armed end of the struggle, the militarist end, the militant end of the struggle. Stay on the political, academic, social, cultural end of the struggle. But once you go military discipline. So that's another thing that they failed. And one final thing is that George Jackson said, if you're going to challenge the oppressor and you're not prepared for the backlash, you either have a death wish or you're naive. The Panthers were extremely naive. The Panthers did not prepare internally for a counterintelligence program. They didn't prepare for a counter. Well, really, it wasn't even counterintelligence. It was a counterinsurgency. They were not prepared. They did not have security protocols, and they started to get that, but it was a little too late. Like the BLA started on that work, but they should have been prepared for the backlash and for the countermeasures the same day before they went public. So again, fortunately, we have the Panthers experience, and I hope that many of us learn from that. What is your favorite book, Arthur? Chill for Media. Who is my favorite Arthur? Wow. I would have to say it's a tie. I would say it's between Amos Wilson. Wow, that's a hard question to ask. And Amos Wilson is kind of but I like Amos Wilson. I actually really like Derek Jensen. Wow. But if I had to pick something, like if I had a book that I couldn't read any other book ever again, I would probably choose Amos Wilson's collection. But again, Dale Jones is also really good. But if I had to pick a living modern writer, it would probably be Derek Jensen. But that's a hard question. I don't. It's really. It would be easier to say who is your favorite historian, who is your favorite political, who is your favorite journalist, but just books in general. I don't know, because every time a name comes up in my head, then another name comes up. Oh, okay. Chill for Media said, "What job did you have when you worked in the prison system?" Dang, somebody doing you're doing opposition research. Yes, I worked at Rikers Island prisons for a few years, and I worked as a radiographer in the Rose M. Singer Center, which was the women's prison, and I worked at GMDC, men's detention. They actually Rikers Island is so huge; they have a whole full hospital on the island because they thought it would be cheaper to treat minor injuries on the island. So there was a acute care center, a emergency room, radiography, diagnostics. So I worked as an X-ray tech, and my job was when they at the time when I worked there in 90. I started working there in 93, 94. When I started working there was actually an epidemic of tuberculosis. So and so I joined the epidemiological study that was kind of rate the epidemic. So we would pretty much yeah. Oh, okay. We would have to do standard chest X-ray on every single inmate that came in there. That's a huge, one of the biggest jail facilities on planet Earth. So we'd had to, and I actually met Flavor Flav. I met Tupac when he was incarcerated at Rikers Island as well. Um, Small guy came to like Tupac came to like here on me. It's weird. But anyway, I did diagnostic X-rays. Also, when there was fights and stabbings, I would also do emergency medical procedures. But mostly, I stuck to diagnostic, and we would do some more invasive exams like gastrointestinal studies. There was a lot of instances on the island where inmates would swallow razor blades or swallow other foreign items or try to commit suicide, and so they would go into the clinical area, and so we would have to do diagnostic work on them too. So I basically worked in the infirmary. I was never a prison guard. I was never charged with guarding the prisoners, disciplining the prisoners. I just provide diagnostic medical services to the inmates there. But while I was there, I witnessed and reported a number of atrocities. There were over 80% of the guards on Rikers Islands were black, and a large percentage of the black, I say probably about 40, almost 50% of them were of West Indian descent. And they would do things like they had these high pressure water hoses. And if an inmate was caught masturbating in his cell or would refuse to some direct order by an inmate, they would hose him down, like straight out of like y'all see those videos of Martin Luther King, the civil rights marchers getting sprayed. So imagine those people were out in the open and they would spray them with water hoses, the protesters. Imagine being locked in a 6x8 cell and somebody puts a high pressure water hose on you. And then you don't have any facilities. And if you've ever been to Rikers Island or most jails, they aren't kept up very well. So the ventilation was very moldy, a lot of vermin, a lot of, I say the vast majority of the inmates I interacted with had skin lesions and rashes and things of that nature. Um, it does a number on you. But one thing that made me feel good when I was at Rikers Island is the inmates. I lived on Eastern Parkway, just off Flatbush, right across the street from the Brooklyn Museum, and I used to play. I used to always be in the Vanderveer and Ebbets Field, and this is the hood. And there was a report saying, 95% of all. No, it wasn't that high, but a large percentage of inmates came from the certain neighborhoods in Brooklyn, Harlem, Queens. And I would always run into former inmates. In all the years I worked at Rikers Island, and every time I ran into a brother at Rikers Island that I met on the island, they always greeted me with love, and they were saying, you treated us with respect. And so I never had any type of insecurity or any issues, even though I was what they call civilian staff. I never had a thought that the brothers incarcerated there, or the sisters, because I work with a lot of women. Like the vast majority of the women were locked up for drug and prostitution type issues, but they always would greet me and tell me that how I would advocate for them. If I saw something, I always reported it. But The biggest issue there was it was a lot of black people doing harm to other black people on behalf of white people. I mean, the closest you can get to like chattel slavery is a U.S. prison in the United States. It was bad, but that's what I did there. I worked there for several years, and they eventually fired me because of my. I would often speak out, or if an inmate came with certain injuries from a CO, I would always write up these reports and all that. So they fired me, even though they needed me. They literally fired me and send me home and say, we're going to let you go. And then they extend me for 2 weeks, and then they extend me for another 2 weeks because even though they didn't want me working there, it was really hard for them to get people willing to come because number one, you had to work in an environment where every day I had to, just like the inmates, I had to go through a metal detector and get searched when I come in and leave. And so they fired me and kept me on for over a month after they fired me because they couldn't find a replacement for me. But I got tired of them holding me in limbo. I'm like, either hiring me back on, and I'm really proud of the work I did there. I think I helped people, but I also kind of felt helpless because there was nothing I could do about the conditions there. It's really sickening. But Jay-Z said he's going to shut it down, so we'll see. 4411825 asks, do you believe ADOS is an organic movement or is there a hidden agenda behind it? I believe that ADOS was started organically, but as with any other movement, movements always get captured and co-opted. I mean, Black Lives Matter, Hands Up, Don't Shoot, most of those movements came up organically, but certain people in power, certain people in positions of influence see potential in those movements, so they graft onto it. Just like the ADOS movement was essentially captured by the Democratic Party, I think that, I mean, not the ADOS, the Black Lives Matter movement has pretty much become a branch of the Democratic Party. The ADOS movement is very cozy with the right, not the center right, not the radical far right, because they don't deal with black people in any capacity, but the centrist right movement. They think that they can use it's kind of like use black people to attack Democrats or to get off the Democratic plantation, just like Kanye. I think Kanye was an Uncle Tom asshole before Trump and the Republicans started pimping him. So I believe that it was founded. I don't think it was founded in some back room of a corporate headquarters or the Pentagon or the CIA. I do believe these Negroes really think that their slave legacy is their central identity. They really believe that their citizenship status as black people with U.S. citizenship puts them above or beyond other black people. I believe because there's a lot of crazy black people. And there's nothing new about the ADOS. There's nothing new about that ADOS sentiment. It goes back more than a century. There's nothing new about the ADOS agenda. Pretty much give us resources to live like white folks. I mean, that's been around for a long time, and they it's one of the more pernicious forms of it. But like I said, if you go back and read Up from Slavery by Booker T. Washington, you see a lot of elements and attitudes that you find now. Or there's another book called Black Judas of Hannibal, Black Judas, and you find in that book Black Judas a lot of ideas that are now. So, and both of those books are like a century old or more. So I don't think it came out of the Illuminati, but I think that people are a lot of enemies of our people. Because if I saw a movement of white people that were like, we're going to take America and separate from all other white people, and we're going to become antagonistic towards Europe, and we're going to, even like with Trump, as bad as Trump is talking about defunding and subverting NATO. He gets a thumbs up for me. If I could help Trump destroy NATO, I would do it. If I had the resources to help Trump subvert NATO, if I had the resources to help Trump to disrupt, like right now, the UN Security Council is losing all legitimacy. I'm against the UN Security Council, which is a white power coalition. So I support subversion of the UN Security Council. So even though we didn't plan on getting Trump to subvert NATO or to delegitimize the UN Security Council, if we were in a position any way we could help him to do that, we should help him. So that's how those things go. It's called capture, agency capture. That's my conclusion. If somebody comes out with evidence that Yvette Carnell, if they go and see a microchip in the back of her neck, and find out some new info, then I'll tell you, I guess I was wrong. I guess the Illuminati reptilian overlords did. She's a clone of kid. So I don't know. But that's the way I see it. That's the way it's been unfolding and unraveling. Uh, what's your favorite YouTube channel besides your own when it comes to Black consciousness information? Uh, Chronicles of Niggatry. I like that, but I don't really watch it. I listen to it while I'm like moving around the house. I like Chronicles of Niggatry. Also, Transatlantic Productions, Tap Videos, Transatlantic Production, because they have all the old scholars, Edward Scobie, Dr. Charles Finch, Dale Jones, Professor Mackey, Dr. Ben. They got all the old Dr. Naeem Akbar, Kwanzaa Kunjufu. So they got all the good stuff. So Chronicles of Niggertree, Dr. Naeem Akbar, and don't go look it up. Oh, you asked for Black consciousness. So that's let me not just give a bunch of lists, but and I'm also going to start creating playlists and stuff because people ask me. So I got like music and stuff and different topics on my YouTube as I'm learning more about YouTube. So, but my favorite YouTube of all is One Mind Syndicate, but it's not consciousness. That is a YouTube channel that does 40K lore, and 40K is like this alternate universe. So that's probably, I'm ashamed of it. I'm ashamed. But since somebody already on here know that I worked in a prison, so y'all doing opposition research on me. So yeah, that's some more dirt y'all can use against me. Personally, you agree with Marx and just think he went about it the wrong way? I think Marx overestimated the humanity of his people. I think Marx felt that his people had gone astray, Europeans had gone astray. Because if you read Marx, he talks about primitive socialism and he talks about early European social relations and economy when women were part of the marketplace and all of that. And when he felt that, the people with industrialization and he felt that his people would naturally abandon capitalism. Essentially, his people would abandon, or the masses of white people would rebel against capitalism when they realized that capitalism is a death engine. It has a death urge and it is omnicidal. But he overestimated the level of humanity and rationality of Europeans. So he was wrong about that. Marx was kind of like, my brother's going to work it out. Your people ain't working it out, Marx. You were wrong, and they're not about to have a root. But anyway. But yeah, I admire Marx. I actually like Marx, and I get in trouble because it's really cool for Black folks to not like Marx. I don't know why. He wasn't talking to us. He's just trying to humanize his own people. Ebony asks, what started Tupac Shakur's regression from a revolutionary artist into a wannabe blood member? Don't ask me about Tupac because I'm Biggie all day. I'm East Coast all day. I'm the West Side. Nah, I'm East Side for life. Nah, but in reality, I don't think Tupac. If we go back to his first album and his first emergence on the stage, he was with Digital Underground, and when he was a dancer for Digital Underground, and then as he went into his own, as he emerged in Digital Underground, do what you like, ooh, everybody do what they Humpty dance is your chance to do the hump. It was that type of stuff, and he fit right in with that, and he was doing the dances. Go look at the early, what's that? All around the world, same song. You go look, and he was doing, but then he came out with Strictly for My Niggas. But niggas was never ignorant getting goals accomplished because wouldn't allow him to put niggas on the cover of his album. So he told the record label, niggas don't stand for Black people. Niggas stand for never ignorant getting goals accomplished. But then after they pressed the album and put it out to the world, they turned around and was like, nah, it really means niggas, 40 and a blunt. And so Tupac was kind of like trying to straddle several worlds. I really think Tupac was haunted by his history with his mother being a Panther and being raised with the Panther ideology. And then his mother became a crack addict. So his mother was also revolutionary streets. So his family has that legacy. But If you read, there was a Vibe article where when Tupac was incarcerated on Rikers Island, and they went and interviewed him, and he said he felt abandoned. So I think at that moment, that's when he became like, I'm gonna get the money and get the streets, fuck it. Because Tupac felt that, when he was at Atlanta, he saw a black man being assaulted by two white men. Tupac jumped out and put his own life and career on the line and shot those white cops who were attacking those black men, that black man. Then they later found out that those two cops were off duty. I mean, he found out they were off duty police officers. So they were trying to put Tupac away for life. And so Tupac was like, I was out here fighting for my people. I was out here trying to put some words out here. I was trying to wake up the street niggas and put a little street into the woke niggas. And then I get locked up. And he said, like, the only person that came to see him when he got locked up in New York was Madonna. And he told Madonna, fuck off. And he really thought that people would be there for him, march for him, stand with him. But if you were around, and I was in New York, I was on Rikers Island at the same time as Tupac. People were mocking him and making fun of him. And there was a song, King's Son. It's like the whole point of being a criminal is getting paid, and you paid already, acting crazy athletic. Fuck a thug life. Niggas die being unlawful. So at the same time, he decided to wage war on the East Coast, war against Bad Boy, go against Nas and Mobb Deep. Was the same times he was like, I'm gonna just get paid for myself. And every revolutionary has that. Most revolutionaries I know are very smart and talented people. And if they wanted to just go out and go either to the stock market, private industry, entrepreneurialism, they probably do very well. And they always get tempted every time they get burnt or crushed, or they have some ambition and it just falls to pieces because the people won't stand with us. So I think it was the time when he got locked up yet again, because he'd been locked up a few times. He'd been shot a couple of times. And Tupac said with his own word, we don't really have to guess. He was like, nobody was there for me, even though I felt like I was there for my people. I was trying to awaken my people. So you notice after he got out and he was out on bail and with Bad Boy, that's when he started wearing the silk shirts and the canes and started, doing, basically, he started doing pop music. Not Pac, but pop, P-O-P, doing music for the radio and just kind of on a decline. And I think that if Tupac had received the support, but I mean, look at Mumia. When Meek Mill get locked up, the people rally for him. And Mumia been in the same jail system as Meek Mill was in, and they're letting Mumia rot in jail. They got a Meek Mill Day, a Meek Mill Street. So imagine how I think Tupac felt like that. And another thing, Tupac wouldn't be remembered if he didn't go to gangster rap, ambitions of a rider, fuck your wife in the set you claim. If he hadn't done that, we wouldn't even know about his progressive efforts, because the gangster shit is what was selling back then. So most people like the gangster shit, and then they stumble on, because, I'm a Tupac fan, and then they stumble on some of his more progressive shit. But to all the way back to basically answer your question, I think he went from, I don't think he was a revolutionary. I think he had a lot of reactionary views, but he was cultivating, he was developing, he was growing, and he was being pulled in many directions. But in terms of his positive or progressive or anti-establishment positions, when people didn't stand with him, when he thought, and he was looking at serious times, when he died, he was still facing indictment. He was still had the potential to be doing 25 to life. He was out on bail when he died, and he felt like nobody was there for me. And then when I do look up, I've been in New York. He made Juice and that other movie. He made a couple of movies while he was there. And then he's like, and Suge Knight came with a bankroll. And so he just went that route, which I don't think if he hadn't got with them, he'd probably still be with us today, but who's to say? But that's what I think. So if you find an artist or a talented person who's fighting for the people, support them hard. Throw everything you got behind them so that they don't turn. Or at least if they do turn, we know because it wasn't because of lack of support. Thomas asked, do you think it's possible to be revolutionary but gangster? Why or why not? You cannot be revolutionary but gangster, because a revolutionary is a criminal and a gangster is a criminal. A revolutionary is a criminal who fights against, who goes against the law or goes against the system for a collective societal benefit. A gangster is a person who goes against the law for a personal individual benefit. So you can't be revolutionary but gangster because gangsterism is reactionary, gangsterism is materialist, gangsterism is predatory and exploitative. Gangsterism is pretty much someone from a lower rung of society trying to use illicit means to get to a higher rung in society. So a gangster is an individual trying to rise up, whereas a revolutionary is a movement or a struggle or an individual who is trying to bring the shit down, not rise up within it. So you can't be revolutionary but gangster. I love that album by Dead Prez. And when Dead Prez came out with Revolutionary but Gangster like 20 years ago, I thought I didn't know that people would take that shit seriously. You know, it's like Fantastic Voyage when Coolio and them come and ride on a. Nobody was really serious. Like, it was a metaphor, you know. So back then, 20 years ago, we'd be like, oh, that song, you know, we used to call everything gangster. But now we really have legitimate gangsters, people engaged in trafficking women, pimping women, in illicit drugs, extortion, robbery, racketeering. You have black people engaged in this, but they think because they gave somebody grandma a rotten turkey on Thanksgiving, they revolutionary and gangster. You can't be revolutionary but gangster. And also, I'm really unfortunate you see these guys with the RBG flags and throwing up gang signs and at the same time black power signs. There has been attempts, failed attempts, to try to merge street hood gangster culture with the revolutionary edict. But everywhere you look, I don't care, in every single culture, when the colonizers, when the oppressors, when the capitalists come to town. In Nigeria, when the Nigerian people in the Ogoni regions rose up in the Niger Delta region and said, you're not going to extract our oil, pollute our lands, and leave us destitute, they went and got the street thugs, the gangsters, the Shell Oil Company went and got gangsters to go and kill the freedom fighters. They did the same. You ain't even got to talk about Africa or Black America. They in Chicago, I posted an article. Go scan my Facebook page where they use Peace Stone gang members to suppress urban rebellions. It's all in the documents are there. Richard Nixon, one of the most racist presidents, one of the most post Reconstruction, one of the most overtly racist presidents, gave the Peace Stone Nation what, $2-3 million? Since when Nixon ain't giving money to people for, he could have given. Now there were still remnants of the Panthers there. There were the All African People Revolutionary Party. There was Rainbow Push. Hell, there was the Nation of Islam. All these black groups around Chicago. But he picked. So the gangsters, black gangsters, have the exact same agenda as white capitalists. Get paid by any means necessary, no matter who you have to step on. So, oh yeah, big up to Transatlantic Production. Oh, I feel like I'm neglecting Facebook again. Let's see what Facebook got. I have to wrap it up. I hear Dr. Mingo sniffing around the door. The U.S. using child soldiers in Syria. Yeah, U.S. is using child soldiers in the hood here in Chicago. Yeah, child soldiers. Oh, I don't want to get off into that. Let me see. Oh, excuse me. I just ate supper. I'm a little sleepy. Don't be ashamed of my nerd cred. I am ashamed of it. You should be ashamed of yours too, Carl. But yeah. I can't see questions on Facebook right now. It's not loading. I'm sorry, so I'm going back to the YouTubes. Okay. So Chris says, so I work with young people. What's your perspective on how to increase African consciousness in the younger generation? Young people, I think I'll just tell you what I do. I just live it out. I let them come to me. I don't really give it to them. I let them come to me for it. So when I was working with the Green Teens, or teaching youth here on the South Side about urban agriculture. I would just do the work and let them come and ask me about it. It's kind of like everybody's trying to sell them stuff and bombard them with stuff all the time. So I number one, they're already African. So if they become consciousness, if you awaken an African youth, then you've awakened African consciousness. But I'm no longer with, I this is what I say about parenting and with youth. What I always say is be present and be yourself. Because that's what they really gravitate to. So I notice when I work with young people, a quarter of them will come and say, why you bringing your lunch? Why you eating that food? Why don't you eat meat? Or what are you listening to? Or why do you say that? Or why do you say that? So I just let it happen organically by being present. And I find that if you're out doing like when I used to do paintball with young people, go play basketball, or just being among them and dwelling among them and allow for organic opportunities as opposed to, trying to say, okay, you need to wake up and do this or don't do that. That's why I mean that's how I do my own damn kids, and they kind of pick it up and develop it. So I prefer it to be organic. I know that's not very helpful, but I mean I've been working with children. Maybe I'll get Dr. Mingo on to talk to you more about that. But I have been invited out, and then I'm always honest with young people, and that's the thing. I can give you some techniques. Never talk down to young people. Talk to young people like you would talk to anyone else, you know. And if they can't follow or they need you to, define some terms, they'll let you know. And I don't hound them. If I see someone wants to know, if they want to find out about what I say, like there was this one kid I was working with last year, and he was going enlisting in the military. He was a high school senior, and he wanted to enlist in the military. And he shared that with me. And I said, I think it's a bad idea if you want to know my opinion. And every day he would come to talk to me about the military. And every day he would come, it's like, oh, it'll get to pay for college. Oh, it teach me discipline. Oh, my brother's in the military and he's doing great. And he would come, and I wouldn't come to him like, hey, don't go to the military. Don't go to the military. He would come to me and he would give me a position. Like, why would you not want to do this? Or how do you dispute that? Or what's your position on that? And then, close to the end of the program, he's like, I'm not enlisted in the military. I think what I got him when I told him that his commander in chief would be Donald Trump. He was like, oh, dead it. But I think that's why I got on the low. I was preparing for a new season to work with the Green Teens, and they told me they were cutting our funding and kicking us to the curb. So they can't have me, you know, unrecruiting their students. Uh, Laura asks 2 questions about Kenya. How can they survive if people take power if they only have agriculture? Even if they kill their enemies, how is it possible they are so Christian? Well, Kenya, it's a unique place. It's weird. Kenya uses more of its agricultural land to grow tulips to ship to Europe than they do to feed their own people. Africa is probably on one of the only land masses on the face of the earth. Now, this won't be true forever. It won't even be true for the next 50 years, half century, that everything within Africa is enough to sustain every African. And in fact, everything within Africa is enough to sustain the world. Fertile soil, raw natural resources, everything from solar, wind, geothermal energy. So Africa, Kenya does not just have agriculture. And also, Africans are some of the most brilliant people. African physicians, mathematicians, engineers. Africans are some of the most brilliant people. But the problem is that Africa is one of their, even now, the number one resource of the African continent are African people. So there are more Africans working in the country of the United States as physicians than the entire continent. Africa sends more food abroad and does more to help refugees abroad than it does internally displaced refugees. So Kenya could survive, not just if Kenyans, they could survive if they realize that Kenya is not Africa, but Africa is Kenyan. So if they could cut off all their former colonial enemies and oppressors, they could drive out the Chinese, they can drive out India, and still, if they get cooperative economics and mutual defense treaties with other African surrounding East African nations, Central, North, South Africa, they'd be fine in terms of feeding their people, housing their people, even technological development and resources. uh, and even if they kill their enemies. And how is it possible if they are so Christian? I'm not sure what you're asking me with that. Um, the thing about killing, the more potential you have to kill, the more you demonstrate your ability and will to kill people, the less killing you actually have to do. Because Kenya and Africa's enemies work off of mutually assured destruction. So if Africa built up its defenses and demonstrated its capacity and will to kill, they won't have to kill. But yeah, Kenya is notoriously Christian, but that's another product of colonization. It is my intent, I will work towards the day when there isn't one African on the planet worshiping one god of a former or current colonizers, where there will be no black Christians, no black Jews, no black Muslims, especially, every African will either follow an ancient indigenous, or you can make up a new African religion, or even more preferably be absolutely atheistic or secular. But, I made a post, I think yesterday or the day before yesterday, where I said that we know that psychological scars are the hardest to heal, but we don't acknowledge that psychological shackles are the hardest to break. And if you're praying to Allah, Yahweh, or Jesus Christ, you have very tight, rusty, crusty, gangrenous shackles on your brain. All right. Trump card. Let's see. Did I miss any questions? I wanted to answer questions on YouTube, but my YouTube page, even though I think I'm broadcasting on YouTube, it's not allowing me to access the comments or the questions. So I apologize if you're watching on YouTube. I'm not player hating. So sorry. Let's see. Might have to wrap this up soon because I'm fading. I have to be back at the hospital at 4 in the morning. So I'm fading. And again, I'm sorry for Facebook. It's not loading when I click on my screen here. It's not loading the comment section. So that's why I'm not answering any Facebook questions. I can see the questions on YouTube. I cannot see the questions on Facebook. Okay, here's one more. Hey, brother, I want to move to Chicago. Any particular area you would suggest for a young single guy new to the city? Okay, yeah, come to Bronzeville. You know what I'm saying? I ain't gonna throw up no neighborhoods, but move to Bronzeville, South Side. Come on, come through. Seriously, because I just talked to Johnny tonight. Where's my notes? I actually was upstairs when I was talking to Johnny. But anyway, we're gonna start 4 new formations and projects with the African World Coalition. Look for that tomorrow. I'm not gonna be here tomorrow. I'm not gonna be on the air either. Like I said, I got to be at the hospital at 4 in the morning, and then I'll be spending the night there with my son. And they said they discharge us Thursday, but I could be there as late as Friday. So I got to get back out of here. I hate the hospital, but anyway. But I appreciate the hospital too. But yeah, move to anything. We're really, I would say, south of Roosevelt. But really, I would say you want to come anything in the 50s or better. Or maybe the 40s are better. Now, people say I hate on the West Side. I don't hate on the West Side. I just don't know the West Side. I know the South. Try to get close to the lake. There's a lot of nice parks over there. But the Obama Center is about to gentrify my area. So get here quick, Antonio. Get here quick for Obama Center. That Obama Center go up. Shoot, I'm gonna be talking to y'all. I don't know. I might be gone by the time because Obama's coming to gentrify. Obama gonna do the South Side of Chicago what Jay-Z did to Brooklyn with the Barclays Center, the Obama Center. And let me tell y'all something about the Obama Library. It's the biggest insult. Oh, hold on. Excuse me. Now, go and look up presidential library. A presidential library is an academic institution. And I don't care whether you like the president or not. I've been to Bill Clinton's library, but if you go to George Bush, you go to Ronnie Reagan, you go to Carter, hell, I think they even gave Nixon, the disgraced Nixon, a library. But if you go there, you find that it is mostly frequented by academics, researchers, historians, political scientists, diplomats. And they keep all of the records and the archives and policy positions and papers from that presidential era. So that's what a presidential library is. It's an academic institution. We already know it's a freaking library, books at least. Obama comes to a black community and he's not opening up a presidential library. He's opening up the Obama Center where he's going to have a hip hop studio and basketball and essentially saying, and he's not going to house his presidential archives there. It is the height of disrespect. And Obama's like, y'all niggas don't need to examine or critique my policies. You don't need to review my history. Here, go play some ball and spit out a rap song and get the hell out my face. That is disrespectful as fuck. It's disrespectful. Obama keeps shitting on y'all plates and y'all keep asking for additional entrees. I don't know why the fuck y'all have such an obsession of love for this man. I don't know why. I can't think of a higher level race trader than Obama. I have no fondness or love or admiration or support for Obama. And he just keeps just doing little digs he just keeps coming at y'all. He turned the nation over to Trump and then went windsurfing with Richard Branson, another imperialist capitalist parasite. And he's out windsurfing as the world burns with a $60 million. How you walk out of if I work a job and I walk out the front of my job on my last day and somebody put a $60 million check in my hand, you got to know that's a bribe. Man. So the Obama Center, I'm going to take it upon myself. And let me tell you something else, something personal. I was King Dita. You don't believe me as King Dita. We had a garden plot at Hyde Park High School. And after they decided to put the Obama Center there, well, instead of growing organic food, we were going to grow organic food on that site for the people, for the community. They kicked us off that land because they wanted to create a gateway to Woodlawn for the Obama people. And if that's what they want to do, they could do that. But they had already had an agreement with us to put an organic farm in the hood. And they kicked us off, and now they got a botanical garden, ain't growing no food, ain't no community outreach. It's just another pretty place to look at for the white tourists that they think are going to come to the Obama Center. Obama hating on me. What's my take on the Black Freemasons? They're running a program to groom black boys for manhood here in Kansas City. It's admirable on the surface, but I'm skeptical because of indoctrination. Man, the Masons been around. Them Black Masons. The Masons is just another. I'm not gonna call it pathetic, but I say this all the time. When black men were freed off the plantation in America, we weren't allowed to go back to our ancestral homeland and do, archaeological research to figure out what our culture was. So when black men, literally black men and women, stepped off the plantation, and one day we were chattel, we were seen as nothing more than animals, and the next day we were full-fledged citizens, and we had no idea how to be citizens. So what you do in that situation is you look around and you just kind of mimic what's going on around you. So black men looked around and they said, okay, you could be Christian, you can be agriculturalist, you could be a Mason. So you'll find that black people in the United States are engaged in everything white folks do. There's nothing that white folks do you won't find a population of black people doing, because we have pretty much saw our path to success and our path to safety was to learn to be like white people. If you dress like white people, you use white people's diction, and you follow white folks' customs, then you increase your ability to have material stability and comfort, and you lower your ability to be attacked, because white people are extremely xenophobic. So the only way they can accept non-white people without lynching, murdering, attacking, robbing, they still do it, but to avoid doing it, is for black people to be as white as possible in our behaviors, if not in our appearance. So black folks became Masons. Now, the Freemasons is just basically the lodge. And there was a time where that was a social outlet for adult men. You go somewhere, you got rituals, you got little slogans, and you sing songs, and you hang out. It was a club, it was a hangout spot. And then they talk all these first. So basically, it was basically the Freemasons for black people was a non-academic fraternity. So if you couldn't be a part of the Divine Nine, if you was a black man, you didn't have money to go to school, or you just didn't want to go to school, but you still wanted to have that brotherhood fraternity, you go join the Masons. And now and then all these crazy racist white men came out with this conspiratorial Ralph Epperson, Unseen Hand, and Dr. Coleman with the Committee of 300 and all of that. And then, oh, the Masons run the world, and the Masonic symbol, the Masonic, all that. So I think that the Masons essentially they played a significant role in the civil rights movements. A lot of the leaders, people who rose to leadership in these what they call the civil rights movement, actually came out of the Masonic lodges, black Masons and deacons. Many deacons were Masons, and Masons were deacons, and stuff like that. So it's essentially a integrationist body. It's trying to build up strong men to be pillars in their community, but it's never been revolutionary, it's never been radical, and it's never been subversive. So you're right to say that they're going to pretty much indoctrinate kids and tell them to drink their milk and to pray every night and to be respectful and pull your pants up. This is going to be more of that. And, I was actually working with Simba Nafana Alani, African rites of passage. So I would prefer that young men, if they must be in some type of programs and mentored by other men, I would prefer it be something of a African rites of passage, as opposed to black Freemasons teaching their old rusty, crusty, dusty Negro proper Negro behaviors. That's my opinion. And I'll be in Kansas City soon. Maybe we go get some Ethiopian food or something. I'll be in Kansas City. I got my niece is pregnant, so I'm about to be a great uncle. And my nephew just had he and his wife just had a little baby girl. She ain't 6 months. So it's a bunch of babies around Kansas City. I got to go pick up and squeeze, and then head back here to Chicago to be miserable. So I'll see y'all Kansas City. I try to make it back home to Kansas City at least once a year. Okay. Did I ever hear about the criminal enterprise the Nation of Islam ran out of Newark and Philadelphia, and the Hafina Muslim Massacre, Farrakhan praise killers? Yes, I've heard about all that. In fact, if you go look up the Dr. Linwood Tauheed, he's one of the, I think, of only about just a couple of dozen black PhDs and economists. He's teaches at the University of Chicago. He was actually in the mosque in Philadelphia after the massacre. He said the guys that went out and did the killing came and prayed in the Muhammad's mosque, and he was in the mosque. He was a young guy back then. He was he's still a Muslim, but he's no longer a member of the nation. And he talked to me at length about that, because he used to caution me, believe it or not. He used to say that I was a bit too fanatical Even though I was secular, he felt that I was a bit, this is when, because Dr. Linwood taught he, I don't know, I would call him, say that he mentored me, but he would probably just say I used to just have to hit this silly nigga over the head. But anyway, when I was a young hothead, he would tell me, I see where, this fervor, this radical black fervor can get you. He said, I was in the mosque when those cats that went and murdered that family, they killed that man, his wife, his children, the little baby, they drowned in the sink. And because he basically, this brother who was in the Nation of Islam stepped out and said, no, I am, Muhammad's prophet. I am the true leader of the nation. And then there's another sect in Kansas with Solomon, the United Nation of Islam, or I think it's the United Nation of Islam, where he also claimed he was the true inheritor of Muhammad's legacy, but he kept a lot of armed guards around him because it's a lucrative position people are willing to kill and die for. But yeah, I'm very familiar with that. Malcolm X said that the nation was not only was engaged in criminality, that it was thoroughly infiltrated by the FBI, and that the intelligence agencies in the United States were well aware of not only the past and current crimes, but crimes that the nation was planning and was allowing them to move ahead. So yeah, I think that the community should know about that. Like I also said, I meet everywhere I go, I find people in the community, active in the community, that are very intimidated by the Nation of Islam. Even in Chicago, when I was working with the Quantum Studio, and we were opening up cooperative enterprises here, and people were telling me, fall back on publicly criticizing the minister because it's just not good for your health. So yeah, I think that even though it's an older organization, they can do damage, at least to black people. In fact, I know about some of the black people that have been subverted, killed, or intimidated by the nation. I ain't heard of one white devil yet that's been taken down by the nation. What do you want from? So yes, Nikki, I think, and I appreciate you. I think we should all work to expose these organizations and not expose them to bring them down, because sometimes exposure and critique can help to build up or improve. Uh, there are only two genders. Okay, I'm happy for you that you're one of the only two genders. Okay, good for you. I'll definitely let you know when the next time I'm in KC. I'll be in Michigan in a few weeks too. Uh, Congratulations. Oh yeah, thank you. Great uncle. Okay, Doll Day, you say the Moors were the Freemasons that thought the Romans who then conquered Moors and stated New World Order. Okay. I know, Nation of Islam. Right. Oh yes, Nation of Islam. True. Yeah. And Nation of Islam, I don't think they'll ever have to answer to the community. We are very, very fond of cults. In fact, the next Bro.Diallo show, I'm going to be talking about cults. What a cult is, why cults are not viable formations or not viable ways. I know Facebook, I think they just cut me off completely on Facebook. Again, anybody that is or that watched me on Facebook, I'm sorry. It had been messing up all night, and hopefully next time it won't do that. And I can answer some of Facebook questions. Oh, and ML, you asked what's wrong with my son. Okay, there it is. Now they cut off the recording. Now I can see some of the Facebook questions, but I'm not live on Facebook anymore. I'm late. What's wrong with my son? Oh, what's wrong with my son is he don't listen. He's hard-headed. That's what's wrong with him. But anyway, he was on his skateboard and fell off his skateboard and broke his leg. Had a really, really nasty fall. He was going down an incline just off on a highway overpass, skateboarding with his headphones on, not paying attention. He claimed he hit a rock or something, obstruction in the sidewalk, and went flying. And he's 6'4". He's like a big tree, so he just timber and fell down. So, do I think that black? This is my last one. After this, I have to go. But Dawde asked, do I think that black Greek fraternities and sororities have failed the black community. No, because can I tell you something? You can't fail something you never meant to serve. You know, that's like asking, have I been a good husband to a woman I never been married to? I mean, so the mission of the black Greek, again, we go back to the black Freemasons. Black folks, when we first got to go to white man's college, and we looked around and saw white folks dressing up like Greeks, so we said we want to be Greeks. But the real position of the Greek fraternity is it's a fraternity, and a sorority is is a closed ecosystem. So that means only the people within that ecosystem are to benefit from that ecosystem. And that's why they have rituals. That's why you got to go through all this shit in order to get in. And then you have things you can't tell people outside the group. And you got when you get on the line and do the dance, if you don't have a jacket, you ain't got the brand, you can't do it. They never existed to benefit the black community. Now you could ask me, have the members of the fraternities benefited from being in the fraternity? Because that's what they exist to. They build up their own within their group. That's like asking, have the Crips and the Bloods benefited the black community? No, they benefited some Crips and some Bloods. So they never had as their mission. Now, you hear a lot of rhetoric about community service and outreach and blah, 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 because there was just a sorority event my wife went to because her cousin is in a sorority, and they gave a scholarship to students. But when they give scholarships to students, they don't give scholarships to students so those students can go off and get training and skills and come and liberate the black community. They give scholarships to students in hopes that those students will go off to college, get higher learning, pledge the fraternity or sorority that helped them to get that education, and then start to feed in when they get their affluent, uppity Negro jobs and feed into it. So it's a closed ecosystem. It ain't for us. They don't exist for our benefit. But some of us get pride looking at black people with college degrees wearing Greek letters doing funny dances. I don't know why y'all so impressed by that shit. But I think it's absurd for black people to claim Greek, because the Greeks are imitators of Africans. So when I was at UMKC, what's his name? Gosh, man, Jamal. I ain't gonna say Jamal. Give me a call, man. In Jersey, if you're still in Jersey. I was a political science major, and Jamal was an engineering undergrad, and we were like, why don't we start an African fraternity? They has all the elements, a history of societies, symbols, rituals. We came up with all kind of stuff, and we came up with all the symbols, and we're going to have an African fraternity on the University of Chicago. So we went to the administrators, or I think it was the Center for Student Life or whatever body. This is again forever ago. I'm an elderly man, so this is a long time ago. But anyway, Jamal, I ain't heard from you in a minute. Give me a shout if you out there. So Jamal and I had this brilliant idea. Let's invent African fraternities instead of Greek fraternities. Or I think we called it Kemetic fraternities, since the Greeks were imitating the Kemites. And the black fraternities got together and blocked us from making an African or Kemetic fraternity. So Europeans say the beginning of Western civilization were the Greeks and the Romans. So if you are a descendant of the Greek and the Romans and you want to pursue higher education, then what you have to do is pay homage to the people who gave birth to the very concept of higher learning, the very concept of philosophy, the very methodology of science. We go back to the Greeks because we pay homage to the people who gave birth to the global human learning institutions, right? But we know they wasn't the Greeks. We knew it was the Egyptians, and we know the Egyptians, hell, the Nubians taught the damn Egyptians how to wash their butts and write in cuneiform and various, picture graphs, emojis, and ancient emojis of antiquity. So it's actually disrespectful for black people to claim Greek, to pledge Greek, to brand ourselves with Greek symbols. It's actually hella disrespectful. So, what they say, Hippocrates of the Hippocratic Oath. He said, I am a student of Imhotep. Even the Greeks paid homage to the Africans. And so it's mad disrespectful, you know. And so I think, real talk, I think that the Divine Nine, they do a disservice, not just to themselves, they do a disservice to the community. And then, but I just leave it at that. And then you see that one girl, they were pimping out their pledges for sex and money, the AKAs. And then every couple of years, you hear about some young, wide-eyed, naive black kid dying or getting injured for life, being hazed, trying to do stuff for pledging. And if you want to read more about really the intricacies of black fraternity life and what they're really doing when they're not passing out rotten turkeys to your grandma on Thanksgiving or giving little $30 scholarships to your nephew after he graduates. There's a guy by the name of Javon Bruckner. He's the publisher of the Ghetto Times. He pledged, he has the brand and the tattoo. He was all 100% in on the Divine Nine. He pledged some fraternity. And he talks about the rituals. He tells all their business, all their dirts, their dehumanizing, sexually exploitative pledging and hazing. He tells it all. So check out Javon Bruckner and tell her Bro.Diallo sent you. Bro.Diallo said, what's up, Javon? Because that's the thing. Stay up out of it. Stay up away. And if you must create a brotherhood, let's build one from ground up. Everything white folks have, from the Freemasons to their fraternities, they pulled out of their asses. You know, the Mormon, you got black Mormons. I even had a bumped heads with some black hairy Christians. But anyway, yeah, if you got to have something, if you can't find something that our ancestors did, make up something new. Because if you're African and you make it, then whatever you make is African. And with that, y'all, I'm going to wish y'all a good night. Again, like I said, don't look for me tomorrow. I'm gonna head to the hospital. I'm gonna be there all night. And hopefully I'll have Wi-Fi because I gotta do some write-up stuff. But anyway, thank you for being with me with another Q&A session. I apologize if I didn't get to your questions. I appreciate those who did ask questions. And I'm sorry to the people who were watching on Facebook because I was able to get to it, and then it basically just dropped me on Facebook. And after it dropped me, I was able to see the last questions people asked. So anyway, so I see some. So I'm gonna pick some of the Facebook questions and start with them for the next session. How about that? I apologize, and y'all have a good night, and I'll see y'all soon. Hopefully, I'll be live on the Bro.Diallo show by Friday, and you guys can here, but because it's going to be a rerun tomorrow, it might be a rerun Friday, but 100% I will be, the Bro.Diallo show will be live and direct. Again, shout out and much love and boundless appreciation to my Patreon supporters. The Bro.Diallo show would not exist without y'all. I'd be sitting in this musty hot office doing for it if not for you. So I appreciate y'all allowing me and giving me the capacity to broadcast on the airwaves and around the world. So shout out to my Patreon supporters. And I'm going to work on this weekend because I'm going to be stuck in the house tending to my son after he has his surgical procedure. So I'll be in here working on stuff. So I will be productive, but I won't be mobile. I'm going to be stuck either in the hospital or at home for the weekend until Monday. My poor garden, y'all. I ain't even gonna talk about the garden, but you know, the struggle continues. Good night, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Peace.